Hello, my blessings, and welcome to my very first series here on YouTube called Becoming Makhosi Zuma. My name is Umuzi Zuma, formerly known as a celebrity makeup artist, but now a diviner, a sangoma, a traditional healer, and an alchemist dressed as Makhosi Zuma. Ibubesele mhlophe, usibinda sibuzwa, ukhozi olunempiko zabadala, uphokophela wempilo. And this is where I take you through my journey of how I become all of that. Welcome and enjoy. My blessings, I promise you, I cannot believe that I'm actually doing this. And the reason why I'm brave enough today to actually do this is because the last time I felt like this, feeling like I'm on the edge of a cliff and the only choice for me is to jump off, let go and let God, was when I began this pilgrimage I'm about to take you through, a pilgrimage that truly changed my life for the better. And so today I chose to trust in God, trust in my ancestors, and take the leap, jump off this cliff, and give YouTube a chance. A consistent theme in my life has always been God will do it. God will show you that his plans for your life will always supersede your plans. And what I mean with that is that I've never envisioned myself becoming a makeup artist. And not only did I become a top tier makeup artist, but I also, through my craft, had the opportunity of making people feel and look good. I also never thought that I'd ever be called or chosen by God, because as a Black Zulu gay person who identifies as non-binary, society's Christian and cultural institutions have labeled my existence and authentic expression of self as blasphemous to the very same God who created me just as I am. But won't God do it? As imperfect, as damaged, and as broken as I was, God still called me, God still chose me, and in 2020 I chose to answer the call, and my life was never the same after. So welcome to my story of how I broke free from the matrix that detested my being and fully surrendered myself to the altars which are the foundation of my existence. This is my story of becoming Makhosi Zuma. Okay, so I was born and bred in a beautiful province in South Africa called KwaZulu-Natal, a city of choice called Pietermaritzburg. And I grew up in a family that I won't say wasn't cultural or was strictly Christian, because there were moments where we had cultural ceremonies growing up, but we were neither here nor there, if that makes sense. But I also had a very colorful upbringing, because I was born at a time where my parents were fortunate and privileged enough to take me to private schools and to really immerse me into a life that none of their children had ever experienced before. And I think that's when my difference truly started. So, I mean, growing up, yes, we did have those cultural ceremonies where, the animals were slaughtered and impepo was burned. So I didn't, grow up ignorant of ancestors, but I didn't grow up thinking that I'd ever have to or become a sangoma, because also sangomas weren't something that I was exposed to growing up. If that makes sense. So with that said, I still, growing up, was what you would call ingane yogogo, which basically means I was my grandmother's child on both sides, my mom's mom and my dad's mom. And I'm very privileged for that experience, because I was still able to suckle all my history, my ancestral history and our ancestral identity from the amazing stories that my grandmothers shared with me of how our families became who and what they were. So yes, as much as cultural practices weren't prominent in my upbringing or in my life growing up, but I wasn't alien or foreign to impepo, which is sage, and I also wasn't alien or foreign to slaughtering and to Zulu cultural rituals or traditions. And yeah, growing up, I mean, animals would be slaughtered at home, but I think I still was that very spoiled and very quintessential child in that, I'd always be present, of course, alongside my dad when the mpepo was being burned. But every single time during the slaughtering, I was never involved. And I always, was on the couch watching Hannah Montana, was obsessed with the Disney Channel. And also, I never ate like slaughtered meat. I always said growing up that I didn't like eating animals that I'd heard being slaughtered, and I think that really was the foundation or the premise of me becoming westernized, because it wasn't anything that we were taught at school, and again, it wasn't anything that I was taught growing up. So it was quite confusing juggling the two worlds, especially as a person who grew up in boarding establishments, because like, what do you do, what do you believe, so it was confusing, but hats off to my family, hats off to my grandmothers, who literally kept me afloat and kept my ancestors alive, even though we had very few ancestral celebrations at home. So I must also add that I'm last born to both my parents. So yes, I grew up pretty spoiled, but I think more than being spoiled, I was overtly protected by both my parents. And also I grew up we had a very big family, so as much as, that young son would be expected to participate in the slaughtering. I think the most I ever did growing up was hold a leg of a goat while it's being slaughtered. And after holding that leg, freaking out and being dramatic, I was in the house and nobody challenged that because my dad would have their head on the spit. Not literally, but I just think, I think my parents were trying their best to help me acclimate into my school culture, help me acclimate into the school that I was attending and the culture that was practiced at that school, so that again, as a very young child, I wasn't completely confused, if that makes sense. But I loved the ceremonies. I loved being at home. I loved having my whole family come to our house. I absolutely loved it. And I think for me, the best part was, like, I come from a very colorful family, a very entertaining family. So it was always right after the Mpepo ceremony, and once everything has been slaughtered, we'd always gather in the lounge as a family, sing amazing songs. And like my dad's older brother was like a comedian. So it was always amazing for me to, catch up with my cousins and bond with my family, especially the vibrant family that I come from. So, oh Lord, every single one of those ceremonies will always be such a treasure to me. I absolutely just enjoyed how those ceremonies and those rituals truly brought us together as a family. So fast forward to 2009, which was the year that I had my first experience with the Sangoma. It was the first time I'd ever met a Sangoma, also the first time I'd ever gone to the place of practice for a Sangoma, which is called Isgodlo, or others also refer to it as Indumba. I had never before 2009 ever gone into a Sangoma's place, or ever needed a Sangoma's cleansing, or needed a traditional healer to come and help me until 2009. So yeah, that's where we're going now with the story. So the year is 2009, mid-year. I was studying for my trial exams, and I had my first spiritual attack. I remember, so it's my bedroom at home, and then it's my grand's bedroom just right next to it. And then the lounge where I was studying was opposite my grand's bedroom. So I left my bedroom going to study. And as I was walking past the door of my grand's bedroom, I collapsed onto the ground. Obviously, my grandmother freaked out. Thank God my mom was home. My grand freaked out, called out for my mother. My mom came, also freaked out, and they were all asking me what's going on. And at that moment, I didn't know what was going on. All I knew is that I had collapsed onto the floor and I was not able to use my lower body. My lower limbs, everything below my waist, was not moving, and I couldn't explain it because, again, I was fine just seconds before. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, now we have my mom freaking out, my gran trying to be strong for everybody, and me just like staring into the abyss, completely confused by everything that was going on because, like, I couldn't process everything that was happening. And then our driver was at home very quickly, and my grandma and my mom got in the car. I was carried into the car, and off we went to my first experience and my first visit to the Sangoma. We get to the Sangoma's house. Again, I'm carried into a place of practice, isigodlo sakhe. And we get into it, and when we get into it, like literally everything was such a flash for me because she got right into work. Also, she was Makhosi. She got right into work, started with her, her practices and her process. Then Beppo was lit. I think, entered into a trance, and I was stripped naked, and I was steamed for the first time, and so many things were happening. But I just think I was like out of it because I was like, I think that's when it started to hit me that, oh my God, what's happening? Like, am I going to be paralyzed for the rest of my life? What's happening? And thank God, we reacted in time. And a few hours later, still at the Sangoma's place, I was able to regain feeling in my lower limbs, and then I was able to start moving my toes and start moving my body, which I was very grateful for. And then after that, we were called in with my gran and my mom into her room, and that's when she started telling us what she had seen, what she had been, or what's been communicated to her. And again, I was pretty much very like not present in that moment. But what I do remember being told is that I am gifted, and at some point in my life, I'm going to have to go through Intwa. So I'm going to have to twasa and become a Sangoma. And the attack that I'd experienced had come from people who don't wish me well and who don't want me to complete school. And I think the drive back home after that was very quiet. We all chose to like ignore the part about me having to twasa, and I think we were all just happy at the fact that I'm able to walk again and I seem to be okay again, and we made our way back home. One thing I have to add about my mother and my grandmother is that they are praying warriors. So when we got home, both my mom and my gran just went out to full mode prayer, and I don't think I'd ever witnessed them reach that level of praying. And I think that's where it first hit me of how serious everything was, and that's the first time I cried. And I'll never forget my grandmother cradling me, because I think that moment just shook both my mom and my grandmother because nobody was expecting it, right? Just a bit more context, on both sides of my family, my mom's side and my dad's side, were very strong Christians. On my mom's side, they were more Methodist. But my mom's grandmother was what we call amabidia. So those women who are cloaked in red, green garments all their lives, known as very profound prayer warriors. My great grandfather from my mom's side was also chief of justice in the area that my mother grew up, and my grandmother on my dad's side was one of the founders of a church here in KwaZulu-Natal called ZCC, which is Zulu Congregational Church. So the church culture, church was a very big thing. I grew up in a church family. Both my mom and dad then grew up and both of them were Methodists. Ubaba, he was part of a Madodana Seweseli, and my mom obviously was Umama Waseweseli. So church was very big for me growing up, and I also attended Christian schools. So Christianity wasn't anything that was foreign to me. But I had never ever seen my mom and my gran reach the level of praying that they reached that day when we came home. And afterwards, I think going forward, my grandmother really took me under her wing, and because of the attacks that I was under, praying for me became like an everyday thing, where every single day now we were praying, every single day before studying, every single day that I was going to school. There was nothing that we did up until I was finished with my final exams that didn't begin and end with prayer, just because we didn't want that to repeat. We didn't want any of the attacks to come back to me and do worse than what the first attack did. And so once the dust settled, I sat my grandmother down. Me and my grandmother, we called each other twins. I can't put into words the kind of relationship we had. But I sat her down and I was asking, like, what does it mean? Like, what did the Sangoma mean when she said, I have to go to Twasa? I didn't know what Twasa was. I didn't know anything about that life. And my gran never really gave me an answer. She kind of really brushed off the topic and was just on some no. Basically, what she was saying is that I'm a gifted child, and at some point I'm going to have to actualize my gift. But that's kind of where the conversation ended. One thing also that really scared me was that the Sangoma told us that I need to pay attention to my dreams. And that was also a new construct to me, because I had never thought dreams were, anything that I needed to take seriously. One thing I didn't like about my dreams is that whatever I did dream happened. And most of the things that I did dream were signs that somebody was about to pass away at home. And I think that's when my grandmother started taking my dreams seriously, because every single time I would dream something and tell my grandmother, a few days would pass and we'd lose somebody at home. So I started having I didn't enjoy dreaming. I didn't like dreaming because I didn't like the fact that I was the one receiving these messages and these signs. So that's me and dreams when I was still young. And yeah, I managed to finish matric, thank God. And we passed. So God and my ancestors conquered for me then. And yeah, fast forward to my life in Johannesburg. Now I'm in university and the attacks came back again. Yo. Of course. So one thing about me is that I'm a very open book, and especially when social media started coming, Facebook and Instagram, I basically shared all my life. Everything that happened in my life was a Facebook post, a Facebook message. I shared anything and everything with everybody. And I must admit, I didn't listen to both my grandmother and my mother, because they would always tell me to privatize my life a bit. And I didn't listen. Of course, I think I just needed to make the mistakes that I made. And so when I was halfway through my first course at varsity, I needed to change institutions because now the attacks got worse, and now this is when the terminology started coming. So what the attack that was sent to me at that point when I was in Johannesburg was something called uduganezwe. So basically, these people were trying to, have me just get lost in Johannesburg, become a street kid, and just like never be found by my family, not succeed, obviously not graduate. So I changed institutions and I just stopped sharing my life as much as I used to, especially my academic studies. And that's why in some interviews I don't like speaking about my first course, because there's just a lot of PTSD that's around that. I'm so annoyed at myself. I got a copious amount of powder in my eye, so I just need to let that relax a bit. Okay, all better. So yes, fast forward to final year university. I'm sleeping and I had my first sleep paralysis attack. I was sleeping and I felt like I was stuck in dreamland. And in this dream, I was having a feast somewhere, and right after eating from that feast, I literally felt my body go into a lock. And I had an out-of-body experience where it felt like I don't know if I can call it my soul left my body, but just like a piece of me left my body, and I was watching myself in bed, not being able to move. And the whole time everything is happening, I'm trying to move my body and I can't move my body. And then I had this profuse headache. And I promise you, this headache just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And part of my physical body is sleeping in bed. And then there's another piece of me, I don't know what to call that, another body of mine that's watching everything transpire. And as I'm in this dream, as everything is happening, I remember I finally got to a point where I just surrendered and I gave up. And I'm just like, if this is the way that I bow out, if this is the way that I die, then let it be. And I remember after accepting that this is how I die, I just prayed, because I remember again, being a Christian, I just knew that whenever I wanted to die, the one thing I do want is to always have an opportunity to be able to repent, because I don't think I'm built or formed for hell. So right after I accepted that this might just be my death, I prayed and I called God's name and I just said, can you please forgive me of my sins? And the second I started praying, that's when my body instantly released. And when that release happened, I remember I shot up and I was staying with my uncle in Soweto. And I shot up and I was drenched. My bed was wet, the blankets were wet, my duvet was wet, I was wet. I went to my uncle, I was crying because I didn't know what the hell had just happened. My uncle again called my mother told my grandmother, my mom was like, and my grand was just like, listen, there's no time for you to travel down from Johannesburg to KZN, so please find a healer that you can go to and have this handled, because again now they're worried about, remember what happened when I was in matric. Yeah, so this is awkward to talk and do my bras at the same time. So yeah, in the morning my uncle wakes up his daughters, my cousins, and they attended a church, the Zion Church. And in the morning, they called one of the pastors who had a gift of seeing and prayed for water to come to the house to just assess everything that happened. So yeah, Vincent, I'll never forget him. His name was Vincent. He came and obviously consulted with me. I won't go into details with this because it does involve. Yeah, I'm not gonna go in detail about this. But yeah, the consultation happened. He put me through a cleansing, and I was able to be good and complete my studies thereafter. And then afterwards, I traveled back home because my mom wanted to see me. So did my gran, and they also wanted me to go back to their Sangoma, so the Sangoma that we went to the first time. And yeah, so we were able to cross that bridge there again, and we were able to cleanse myself out. And this time, now I was starting to take this world, or this side of the world, more seriously, because the attacks were happening more regularly, more frequently. So now it was disturbing me mentally. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of driving, I was afraid of speaking, I was afraid of leaving the house. I was just like, now just overwhelmed with fear, because like I didn't know what to do and I didn't know what not to do. And I remember before I left to return back to Joburg, I was crying, and my mom was in my grand's room, and I'm just like, part of me doesn't even want to go back to Joburg, because like I don't know, I didn't know. I still don't have the words now as much as I didn't have the words then. But I just like, when you kind of just want to enter I don't know what, but like to just run away from things and just to hide and live your best life, but also not show or tell people about your best life, because every time you do, you almost die. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was my life for so many years, and it was just crazy. So I had the cleansings done in Johannesburg, and then I had the cleansings done for me here in KZN, and that's where my grand sat my dad down. And let me finish this. So yeah, I was still home, and now the tricky thing is I could only travel down home in the weekends, and my dad was never home in the weekends because he traveled for work. So I needed to obviously skip a few days of school, and wait for my dad to come back, because now this was serious. So my grandmother sat my dad down and told my dad everything that was happening. Now, this was a tricky part. Not that my dad was like anti-cultural things, but he just needed a lot of convincing to do, anything that needed to happen, And I think, again, just because, again, I'm his child, now when things were now affecting me in my life, he jumped at it, and we had a cleansing ceremony to appease the ancestors. And I think I'll insert a picture, but that's like my favorite picture now. My grandmother is late, but yeah, in that ceremony, me and my grandmother had our first Zulu bracelets. Ispandla. That was the first time I had Ispand. Not the first time, the other time was when I was a kid. But like this is the first pandla that I remembered. And yeah, my dad put this pandla on me and on my grandmother. And I felt so good. I was in love with my Zulu bracelet. And then after the ceremony, I then made it back to Johannesburg. Sorry, I had to do this part off camera just because of the amount of focus it requires. So yeah, I completed my first course and then continued my studies at UNISA, corresponding because I just love studying. And yeah, I started living my life. And I had a few friends of mine in Johannesburg. You know, we all come from Pietermaritzburg. You know, we are the same age group. And obviously we were girls, you know, and we'd share our lives and we'd share the different things that we go through. And after speaking about so many things, we had so many things in common, and we decided to go consult with our first healer. So we went together as a friend group. And child, when we got there, files were unleashed and names were revealed and puzzle pieces were coming together, and my jaw was on the floor because so many people that I vehemently loved, I needed to realize and accept that they didn't love me back or didn't wish me well. And it was a hard pill to swallow, especially as young 22-year-olds. And I'm so grateful to this day that the Sangoma that we went to, you know, wasn't hungry for amatwasa, wasn't hungry for money. And so again, for me, when he told me Uguti I needed to go twasa, I'll need to eventually embark on this journey, I asked for the first time, I was just like, you know what, I need to make an adult decision about this that always keeps popping up. Is there anything that I can do to appease my ancestors, to ask for more time, for me to just get my life in order before I answer this call, or before I do, or I embark on this journey that they're asking me to embark? And he said, absolutely yes. We did the ceremony, and let me tell you, after that ceremony, it was like God and my ancestors literally lifted the boom gate and allowed me to live. And from that point onwards, I lived and I flourished. I lived my best life. My career started popping. My health was at its best. I felt alive again. I felt human again. But y'all know, it wasn't for too long. So, the more I progressed in my career, obviously my career now started involving a lot more celebrities, which means as much as I could try keep my own life private, I could only do as much without people would know what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and who I'm doing it with. I also started traveling internationally quite a lot, and of course that made so many people upset. And I still, to this point, I just don't get it. I don't get why, especially to us as Africans, to us as Black people, why the success of another Black person just discomforts somebody to a point that it pushes them to really wish them well, to wish them ill, to send them curses, to do all this witchcraft that literally could kill a person just because another Black person is progressing, or another Black person's child is progressing and yours isn't. That will forever baffle me. As much as I'm a healer now and I deal with these cases on a weekly and a daily, it'll always baffle me because I just don't get it. Like, what is it are we trying to achieve? Do we collectively not want the success of Black people, or do we want success only if it's within our own households, and not even own households, because family is also not absolved from this. It just never made sense to me, and I never understood it. But anyway, like, honest to God, there is no way I'm not gonna not vent about this in this video, because the things I've literally been put through by people who were just straight out jealous. That's the word, jealous and envious. There's no words for it. There's no words for it. Like, I don't know how many times I've escaped death row because of people just not wanting me to live, not wanting me to accomplish things, not wanting me to make something out of myself. And I can't explain to you just how depressing that in its own is. And also because the big question is why. like, what do you get afterwards? Like, what do these people achieve? Like, okay, you kill me, and then okay, so let's just put the spirituality part of it aside, and then speak about life, because over and above all these attacks, life still goes on, and you still have to kind of like be a human through it all. And the humans in this world were taking me through the most professionally, romantically, and friendship wise. Yo, guys, Mina, I don't know, maybe it's because I come from a small hometown, but I was never ready for the demons and the monsters that I encountered in Johannesburg. And I think I could only go through so much. So in the peak of my career, in fact, some of the people that I was working with were indescribable monsters, and I just never understood why. Because I mean, you need to do a job, I need to do a job, and isn't that what brings us together? And so I also don't think people understand how challenging it was, to be one of the trendsetters in freelance artistry, but it's okay, it's fine, to each their own. But yeah, fast forward to 2016, my life changed forever. I lost my grandmother. And there's a client of mine that I'll never forgive for this, because like they knew of the relationship that I had with my grandmother. In fact, in the last days of my grandmother, I was on an international gig, and I needed to leave the place that I was at because my grandmother kept calling for me. So I flew back to South Africa to come see my grandmother, and we had an amazing weekend with her. And then a few weeks later, God called my grandmother. But the day God called my grandmother, I had work. I had work, yo. So yeah, the day my grandmother passed over, and transitioned, I had a work gig that evening. And one would expect Uguti, once you receive such news from your family, it's pack everything up and go home, because that's where you need to be at that moment. Nope, not for the client that I was working for. I call them, I let them know what just the phone call that I just received. And they're like, no, I'm so sorry, but you do know the show must go on. And I'll never forget this because they used Vanessa Hudgson's story, that Vanessa Hudgson's apparently lost their father and needed to go on stage that very night, and went on stage because this is the industry that we're in, and these are the things that we have to go through. And I think I didn't have any energy to fight this person, and so I called my family, I told them this, and I stayed in Joburg for an extra 4 days so that I was able to see through the gigs that I needed to see through. So yeah, like I don't want to go into guys, literally there are so many things that I've been through, and I'm just trying to pick in my brain just the things that are just crucial for the context of this story that I'm sharing with you. None of them were nice, but I think fast forward to 2017 February, there was only so much I could take, and in February I just had reached the peak. I couldn't do it anymore. I'd gone through everything, like friends breaking my heart, tarnishing my name, being blackballed, being called names that I never even knew where they came from, being evicted, staying in the stairs of my apartment block, sleeping on friends' couches, just to literally survive backstabbing after backstabbing. And so I just couldn't do it anymore. And in February, I attempted to take my life. And I don't think I was ready for how serious that was. I think I was very serious in my attempts of doing so. And yeah, it was a very touch and go situation, very close call. I was in a coma for a bit, in and out of the ICU. And that's how I left Johannesburg and I came back to KZN. And I think literally that was the first sign of God showing me that He's calling me. He's serious about calling me now. And He called me back to the haven that I needed to be in so that I was able to see and to hear Him call me. So yeah, I guess as much as God's calling in my life was getting louder and louder, I think I still wasn't ready. I think I still wasn't ripe enough, because as much as I thought that I'd gone through everything in my life, then was just the beginning. And I had so much more to go through, I think. I realized. Let me put these lashes on. So yeah, moving back home and deciding to stay back home and really leave Joburg wasn't an easy decision to do, because one still needs to work, one still needs to make money, and Pietermaritzburg versus Johannesburg and the industry that I was in, that wasn't an easy thing to try and navigate. But this time around, I wasn't going to gamble with my life anymore. This time around, I think I had chosen myself. I chose myself, and I chose literal poverty than staying in a toxic place, working for toxic people and surrounding myself with toxicity. It wasn't easy being back home. It was still challenging. I wasn't getting work. The situation at home had changed. My parents now needed more help from me. My parents weren't able to help me as much as they used to be able to help me. Everything now is on my shoulders. And I was getting gigs. I was working, but people were not paying me. It was very frustrating. And then I found myself 2019 going through the worst season of my mental health ever. I went through the worst bout of depression that I could ever think of, that I'd ever gone through or experienced, because it was just, years of not getting booked, years of not getting money, working and not getting paid. I found myself in August admitted in a care center, Oatlands Care Center. And again, that for me was life-saving. So yeah, as much as shit was quite literally hitting the fan for me, this time around suicide was not an option, because I was not going to put my mother through that again, and I was not going to give up on myself again. I made a promise to myself when I made it out of hospital to never go through that, especially because my mother had, shared with me that the one thing that made her so grateful to God, is when I woke up from my coma and she saw the white of my eyes again. And that again for me completely transformed me, and the vantage point that I was using to assess or to dissect life through, because I had given so many people power over my life, people who did not matter, and I'd forgotten about those that matter the most, especially the woman who I come from. And so at that point, even though people were treating me like I literally come from nowhere and I don't have a parent and I don't have family, it was all good and well. You could do whatever it is that you wanted to do to me, but I made a decision there again to not go down that road again, to not put my mother through that again, because again, if somebody can give birth to me and through all my imperfections, one thing can celebrate just seeing the white of my eye again, that's all I needed to get my zest for life again. And I used that, and I really got in touch with my GP. My GP linked me with a psychologist and psychiatrist, and I began my journey tackling my mental health at Oatlands Care Center under an amazing psychiatrist and psychologist. I was diagnosed with depression and bipolar 2, and was taking an endless list of medication. But 3 weeks later, I was discharged, and I felt so much better, because I wasn't enjoying the route that my life was going. I gave into substances. I was partying like ridiculously. I was drunk almost every single day. And I it worked for a few years. It kept me balanced for a few years. And that's why I always say never judge people for what they are going through, because you don't know what void they are filling with whatever it is that they're using. So whatever your own opinions or perceptions of alcohol and substances circumstances are, those are your opinions and perceptions for you and your life, but you don't know that when people consume these things, not that I'm promoting substance abuse, not that I'm promoting alcohol or anything like that, but what I am promoting is that we all just need to be a bit more cognizant of the fact that we're all going through the most, and you never know what a person is going through. So don't judge what they are doing to fill the void. Sorry, I have no idea what happened there. I thought it was recording, but it wasn't. But I'm so glad that it wasn't, because I had my first round of tears, and I was hoping to get through this video without any tears. Thank God it wasn't recording. But yeah, where was I? I don't even remember what the last thing I said was. Oh yes. After I got discharged, I was on pretty serious medication, chronic medication, which I was so grateful for because it kept me sane. And yeah, I didn't need to rely so much on alcohol anymore and on going out anymore, because now I wasn't replacing those empty spaces and the voids that I had in myself with alcohol. The medication was keeping my mood balanced, and my medication was keeping me afloat. Fast forward to 2020, beginning of 2020, and I think I just got tired of having to take medication every single morning and every single evening to feel human and to feel sane. And so that's when I realized that changes need to be made in my life. At this point, I was also really tired of going to consultations with various healers and sangomas. I was tired of being told that I need to twasa. I was tired of being told that I need to become a sangoma, that I need to answer my calling. I was just tired of being told all these things and not being given instructions of what I need to do. And so that's when that's when I really started to stop listening to outer voices and to really draw into my inner voice and go to God and go to my ancestors and ask for more clarity and ask for direction, because that's when I felt ripe enough, and that's when I felt ready to approach God and tell him that as his child, I was ready to answer the call. But nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for everything that happened after making that decision of answering God's call. We're gonna call it a wrap for part 1 of my series about becoming Makhosi Zuma. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss the parts that are to come and to follow. Thank you so much, my blessings, for listening to part 1 of my series, Becoming Makhosi Zuma. I hope more than anything you felt empowered and encouraged to remain faithful and hopeful as you weather whatever storms and circumstances currently unfolding in your life. If I can do it, then so can you. Please feel free to utilize the comment section down there below to drop all your comments and your experiences and ask any questions that you might have, and I'll do my best in answering them. If you don't notice this filter, it is from TikTok. I am on TikTok, and I do live. I do go live regularly to have more engagements and interactions. So please follow me. It's at Muzi_Z, and we'll continue the conversation there. Again, don't forget to click the bell for notifications so you don't miss not one part of my series. Coming up next, I'll be taking you through the tumultuous journey of finding a Gabala and finding the right sgodlo for me to go and start my ndwaso. I'll be telling you about part 1 of my ndwaso and part 2 of my series, Becoming Makhosi Zuma. From me, as always, it's love and light.